Chapter 1. My Birth on Earth, The Early Days. The NDE translation of Michael William AngelOh. During my early childhood years, I had experienced vivid flashbacks of being wrapped in the fetal position within my mother's womb before my birth. These flashbacks would come with waves of warmth accompanied by a golden light, which left a deep sense of contentment within my being by the time of my birth. I can remember being pulled out of my cozy little womb cave, slapped on the butt, and I could have sworn I heard the doctor say the words, "Welcome to Earth, brother." That day in a Chicago, Illinois hospital was January the 8th, 1952. One of my earliest recordable memories on Earth occurred 11 months later while I was in my all-time and very favorite place in all the world, my mother's arms. The only reason I will share this early lifetime experience is because, as I had learned much later in life, this would qualify as my very first discernible OBE, or out-of-the-body experience. This OBE was the prerequisite for the adjoining NDE episode I would experience as an infant of 11 months old and experience once again some 13 years later during my drowning episode as excerpted from my daily diary chronicles recorded herein. I know I was 11 months old because it was the day my mother brought my baby brother Dennis home after his birth at the hospital on December 23rd that same year in 1952. It was sometime during that day that my beloved mother was holding and rocking me as I nursed blissfully in her loving, secure, and cradling arms. I recall hearing a loud cry in the distance, being placed gently down in my baby crib as I watched my mother smile lovingly back at me. She then walked slowly out of the room, leaving me behind in my baby crib and feeling what I would later describe as a separation from my source of life sustenance, namely my mother. I suddenly felt a shiver of fear and intuitively knew something was wrong. This would be the very first time I had felt such a discontinuous feeling so deep within the very core of my tiny baby being. The combination of hearing that cry, which I would later realize came from my newborn baby brother's room, was then followed by the sudden departure from the intimate closeness I had shared with my mother for some 11 months straight, having been born the eldest and only child present for all of those 11 months of bliss-filled time. As an infant, I had known nothing else than being held in the nurturing care of my beloved mother's arms. Now she had left me behind, with the root sensation that my newly formed human existence was suddenly being compromised and coming to an abrupt conclusion. An experience I could only much later cognitively identify as death or death-like. This was my first real recollection of a separation from my mother, someone who represented the source of my very life's existence and sustenance. As I watched her leave my room, I felt like the end of my life had truly come that day. It was as if my life force was departing from my body and was being removed to an unfamiliar place. Although I still had no cognitive concept of what death was at the time, this was a real experience which in every way felt like my impending demise, which had summoned my earliest sensations of fear, loss, and impending non-existence. Deep inside I felt a call, a cry of profound sadness and loss, although I made no audible sound to express this feeling. The intensity of this fear gave way to what I can only now describe as being my very first near-death experience. As I shivered uncontrollably with the ever-growing primal fear that an end to my existence had arrived, I suddenly observed and felt a golden light begin to glow all around my body and inside my baby bassinet, and continue to expand itself until it filled my entire bedroom. This light glowed as a bright white orb or sphere with an intense golden radiant aura surrounding its outer perimeter. I observed it glowing more intensely in my sudden and stunned state of rapture. This radiant light continued to grow in its orbital size with each passing moment. Of course, as a baby, I had no idea what was happening. I am now describing it by way of remembrance and in an enhanced retrospect of those passing moments. It was as if someone were turning up an electric dimmer light switch, but instead of light bulbs glowing, the light source appeared to look like sunlight filling the room to its most luminous capacity. With each and every moment inside this golden light presence, I suddenly began to feel the deepest sensation of an inner calmness and a profound sense of safety presiding itself all around and about me. It was just at this moment I recalled and had seen past images of a very similar feeling I had once experienced resting within my mother's womb prior to my actual birth on earth. The same light and warmth comforting me some 12 or so months earlier was again showing that its presence had never left me. What I experienced next, although it may be quite unbelievable, felt somehow totally normal and natural to me at the time. As an infant, I had no preset mental images or expectations of what was possible or impossible. I saw and experienced a large hand of light reaching into my baby crib and lifting my tiny little baby body up and out of my crib, then transporting me in and through the walls of my bedroom and through other rooms and walls of the house. I felt that as my physical body were now made up of a translucency in a body able to penetrate and travel through solid matter itself. I noticed my infant baby body still appeared to be behind me and resting almost motionless in my baby crib below. Whatever was happening to me, I discovered later, was known as bilocation, the ability to be present in two separate places at the same time. It was as if I were two separate identities existing side by side, moving in a syncopated motion and connected by a slim cord or conduit of golden light. As my new sense of being in a light body was traveling forward, I could see my physical body separating itself from what I had previously thought was me, as I still identified myself to my own physical body. This light body, which I was incapable of understanding or defining at the time, would later in life become known to me as my soul body. This newly discovered soul body began its flight, moving in and through the walls of the building and infrastructure we would have then called our home. I say we because I sensed I was not alone, but being held and transported by this carrier of light I couldn't have identified properly at the time, but sensed it was in some silent form of communication with me. I can identify it now as a circular light orb which seemed malleable in content, with the ability to morph itself into various forms as desired. It now carried me forward, passing through the first wall of my bedroom and then through every wall thereafter to its desired destination in our home. I was suddenly able to see through other walls in the house and all the way into the room where I could now see my mother holding my baby brother Dennis in her arms. It was within this soul body that I first experienced an existence of a separate reality. I would later discover this new luminous soul body had its own eyes, ears, mouth, head, hands, arms, torso, legs, and personified sense of being. This then eventually became my newly appreciated and beloved soul body that was now floating just above and behind my brother and mother's physical forms, located some 4 to 6 feet below my point of visual perception. I felt a great comfort overwhelm me upon seeing my mother again, as I could plainly observe it was my baby brother Dennis who was in her arms, enjoying the same blissful state I was already so familiar with. Whatever experience of abandonment, fear, or even self-perceived death might have been present within my earlier, now quickly departed from the transparency of my new discovered light body of being. Now was the time I had completely recovered and re-established a total reunion to my mother's loving presence within my being once again. At such a moment, perfect peace was restored to me, and in the blink of an eye, I suddenly found myself back inside my physical body and inside of my baby crib, as I quietly and quickly fell into a deep sleep. Only many years later would I be able to understand I had encountered my first soul travel experience as an infant of 11 months of age. I am often asked why Sundays are so important and so very special to me. It's not an answer I can give quickly or without some deep consideration, because there are so many reasons this day is different from all others. I suppose it really started back in the early years of my childhood. My beloved mother was born in Italy, and my hard-working and dedicated father was of Irish descent. Both had a devoutly Catholic upbringing, which they passed on to us. This meant, among other things, we did not eat meat on Fridays and were raised in a strict Catholic and religious tradition. My understanding as to the reason for this abstinence from eating meat on Fridays is that it was in remembrance of the day Jesus Christ sacrificed his life on Good Friday for all of humanity. It is then considered to be a form of personal offering and a day of remembrance of the sacrifice made by the Son of God for our redemption, providing so lovingly by God the Father, whose dwelling place was in our own celestial home called heaven. Our most loving mother always prepared delicious tuna fish or grilled cheese sandwiches for us on those so-called meatless Fridays, which she carefully packed along with an apple or banana in a brown paper lunch bag for each of us to carry to school each and every day during our childhood. I can say I recall many a time where my classmates were bargaining to acquire one of those wonderful sandwiches my mother had so carefully prepared for us. I don't remember ever trading any of them away to anybody for anything. My diet has changed quite significantly since those early days. I have been a fairly strict vegetarian since 1971, when at the age of 19 I observed blood percolating out from the top of a piece of meat cooking on our kitchen stove at home. That very evening at dinner, I excused myself from eating the meat, but consumed the tossed salad and baked potatoes instead, and haven't had a bite of meat since. For many years, since that bloody revelation, I would fast each Friday from all foods, with the exception of fresh fruit or vegetable juices and herbal liquids. It became a day of self-cleansing and dietary purification. As a good Catholic boy, I was prompted to go to confession on Saturdays, at which time I recall having to make up sins because I usually couldn't remember any of my own. I'm not saying I was an angel, yet just a very good and usually most obedient child and adolescent. In our family of 8, we all went to Catholic Mass regularly every Sunday morning. I served as an altar boy at our Catholic church, Queen of Apostles, located in San Jose, California. I would so love lighting all the candles before the celebration of each Sunday Mass service. These were all very fine memories, but the most wonderful memory of all was that after our entire family would come together to attend Mass, we would all file into the family station wagon and drive out to continue our Sunday ritual and celebration. This was handled quite nicely, with an assortment of Jelly Roll and Maple Bar donuts, along with floating icy chip A&W root beer sodas. After gathering all of our Sunday goodies, we would then drive home. My father would distribute the tasty treats equally to each and every one of us, then attempt to fairly shell the comic section of the Sunday newspaper. The paper, dispersed normally, began with me as the eldest, and then circulated down the chronological chain to my dear brothers and sisters. Most Sundays, after our morning breakfast was consumed, we would go out for a drive to the nearby beach or state park. Living in San Jose, California, this usually meant going to either Vasona Lake in Los Gatos, Big Basin State Park, or Santa Cruz Beach and Boardwalk, all located in Northern California. This combination of childhood events has forever left within me an indelible memory of a loving family and an endearing celebration of life on each and every Sunday, which I have never since forgotten. This is but one of the many reasons Sundays became so very special to me as a child. Of course, there were certainly many other reasons Sundays became my very favorite day of the week, besides being the only day I can recall seeing my father, whom I would describe as being a workaholic throughout my early childhood years. Sundays was the only day I can now remember being together with the entire family for at least most of the day. I had already mentioned that it was a day we all went to Mass together, and I loved being at the service, singing the songs and saying the prayers together as a family with the church congregation. When reciting the various prayers said together during the celebration of each Sunday Mass, I had always received mental pictures or images that went along with the words sung or said during each prayer. These bright images, shining together with the words of the prayers, made them much more authentic and powerful in their proclamations and devotional intentions for the needs and spiritual well-being of all in attendance. These Sundays in the Catholic Church placed me in the presence of the light, which was shining through the many stained glass windows so prominently placed around and within the interior of the church. Many times, while looking directly into the light being projected through the sacred images portrayed within the stained glass, I would notice some of the figures begin to move. In some cases, I noticed the light would project a bright and glowing figure some 6 to 18 inches beyond the stained glass surface, making the figure to be alive, in more of a holographic form. These sacred images moved themselves directly in front of me and were projected in a most brilliant and vivified light. The details of the face and hands of these holy personages became most conspicuously present to me through all the tiny pieces of colored glass. This was especially the case with the stained glass figures of Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mother Mary. A part of me knew these were only stained glass windows, but I could not deny I was in effect having visions of the Holy Family every time I attended a church service. I would even on occasion hear members of the Holy Family, saints or apostles present in the stained glass figures, recite the prayers we were saying together as a congregation. This was just one of the many reasons I so look forward to going to Mass each and every Sunday morning. I have for some time now referred to this most special of days as Sacred Sunday. Years later, during my NDE, my most profound experience in the revelations of my afterlife had shown me very similar figures being projected in the light as I had been so accustomed to seeing in the stained glass window figures always presented to me during the Mass at our church. What I saw projected in the translucent light during my NDE that I hadn't recalled seeing in the sacred glass windows during Mass was the so-called mansions in heaven, which were revealed to me on that sacred Sunday in 1966, and of which I will always describe as unforgettable. Contemplation number 1. It's Sunday, August the 28th, a special family outing at the beach, till I stepped into an ocean undertow and was pulled far out of reach.